always loved to play the piano. And when I was at home, my older brother and sister each played, and I would just love to get into their music. And I, to this day, don't know how I did it, but I could read just the top part of the music that had the melody line, although I couldn't play the rest of it down, the accompaniments. But I would go in there and pick out those melody lines when I was just little and play those, and I just loved to do it. So anyway, our piano was in this spatial room. And I had a picture up on my wall of Saint Cecilia, and she was the woman who played so sweetly that the angels in heaven came down to hear her. And she was my inspiration. I was about 10 at the time, 9 or 10, that I started to take lessons. And my mother said that, she would let us take piano lessons. My twin sister said, I don't want to take piano lessons. And so she just didn't want to. Well, with me, I was just tickled to death. This is the greatest thing that's happened in my life, so far, that I'm going to get to take piano lessons. So I did, and I took lessons from her, and off and on until I was married, and I was 18. And when I got married, I was the last one at home in my family, and I was loved the music so much, and my mother gave me her piano. And I had that old piano for years and years, and finally I got my new piano at the time of our 25th wedding anniversary. Is that an important part? Yeah. Well, most of all is my family, my children, and my grandchildren. My first child is Vicki. Her name is Vicki Ann. She's named for her daddy, who is Victor, and his mother, who was Anna. And so I combined the names and called her Vicki Ann. She's married to Donald Moser, and her daughter is Ann, my first grandchild. Then the second one is Mary Ellen, and George, the last one. Well, I should say that Mary Ellen married Fred Fitzer, and she has 2 boys, Derek, who is 23, and Mark, who is almost 19. Then the last one is George. Well, there's 5 years between Vicki and Mary Ellen, and then there's 7 years between Mary Ellen and George. And George married Carolyn, and they have one daughter who is Lori. Her real name is Lorraine for her grandmother, but we call her Lori, and she is 19. As we open our book, we First we see pictures that Vic has made drawings of the garage that he plans to build, of the floor plan, and then also how it will look when it's finished, the outside. And my father was a contractor. He built homes for himself, and also he built homes to rent. And by the time that we were married, he had retired. But he was so interested in Vic's building the garage, and he helped him with the plans, and he really was a lot of help in helping with the plans and telling us, well, just giving us advice in different ways. And he and I even went on some lumber hunting trips. The lumber that we had in order to build the garage was stored on the lot near the house where we lived, and it was supposed to lie there in season. Anyway, we have pictures of the lumber, and here's my father, a picture of my father with the lumber. And then there are more of him planning when we dug out the what they call the footer. This thing that's on the next page is called a footer. I'd never known that before. As they dig this out and then put concrete down in there for the basis of their building. Then after they get the footer down and they start putting down the blocks, and about every Sunday after church, when we were all still in our church clothes, we would stop by, because this was on our way home, because we lived just down the road a little ways. And so here's a picture of Vicki. Here's a picture of me all posed sitting on the pile of cinder blocks. It looks like I have my hair in a pompadour type thing. It looks really fancy here, and I am sitting all posed. Then the steel beams went up, and my sister, my twin sister Lorena's husband, had a brother who had worked a lot in steel, and he helped us a lot with that sort of construction. Then finally, the beams were in place, the plate glass was in place, the overhead doors, and just everything that we needed to finish the garage. And there's a completed picture of it. That's the story of the garage. That was 1945. One time, my husband's brother, Don, he was making a joke, and he says, if you ever want to tear it down, you can just look at this book from the back to the front. But he had that idea, you just, look at it, just go backwards and you're tearing it down. But we didn't think that was really too funny. We're talking a little bit about Vic's garage. After he had built the garage, well then, for a number of years, he worked full-time in his garage. And we lived first down at the house below, and he would come up here and work. And so during those years, he had several employees, but he did all of the painting. He has a paint room in the garage where he painted cars. And he worked that way for a number of years. But then he was asked by the Detroit Steel to come down there and become a sign painter. But we talked about it. We didn't quite know what to do. We'd built the garage, and he had a thriving business, and it was a real decision to make. I know we talked to our pastor about it, and we just, really prayed about it and thought, what should we really do? This is a matter of our life, And so we came to the decision he should go. And the main issue was that he would have a good retirement and hospitalization and all these benefits that you just could hardly afford to have carry for yourself as long as you were conducting your own business and keeping a family. And so we decided that this would be the thing to do, and as it was, it turned out to be good. Well, during those years that he was working down there, he would go down there in the early morning, and then he would get home like about 2:30 or 3, probably about 3 o'clock, and then he would go over to the garage and work for all hours of the night. And these men who worked for him, why they would work there during the day. And I try to be a help to him. I always try to keep the checking account balanced and help write out the monthly bills. And so this went on, for quite some time. And then eventually came time for his retirement. And then he has two antique cars over there that he hasn't done too much on. He has an old Packard, and then he has this old Durant, and that's his prize car. He has a real shiny, good paint job on it, and everybody gets excited when they come in and he shows them this car. And since he's older, he no longer has any employees, and he doesn't work an awfully lot. But he has people who still like him to do their work, and it seems like every once in a while he gets a job coming in. And he has his bear outfit, and people are, they'll call for wheel alignments. And so he just sort of works at his leisure, you might say. And yet, I could never bring myself to think we should ever sell the garage or anything, because he would be completely lost without his garage. It's right here next to the house, and he goes over there, and he calls it his big dog house. So if ever he gets into any problems with his wife, he goes to his dog house. But really, I know he enjoys it. But then after we had the garage for maybe about 5 years when we started the house. And the house was built and finished, and we moved into it in 1950. So then here they are digging out for the foundation of the house. So then we move on. We have some pictures of the blocks that were put inside, and then the brick is put on the outside of the blocks. Now here are some more pictures, and Marianne standing on the cinder blocks. So we had block layers and then the brick layers who came and put that up. And we didn't have a contractor just to do the work, like just somebody hires out to do your house. We had all these different people. And my father, having been a contractor, he knew a lot of different people, and Vic had become acquainted with them too. Here's one of them, like coming home after church all dressed up and looking out what is to be the picture window. I had another picture of myself standing in what is to be the music room. Well, we planned the music room. I mean, that is really what that room was for. It was never planned for any other reason. And we made the flooring. We have oak flooring all throughout our house. And we put some spatial beams underneath there where the piano would sit, because the piano's heavy, so that the piano has a spatial place in my music room. And when we put the closet in the music room, instead of having just an ordinary closet, we put shelves up the closet so that I would have a place for my music. Then after we built the first part of the house, the bottom part of the house, which is all brick, then the upper story, the second story, was going to be made of cedar shingles, because I had seen those on a house and I just loved them. And so we put cedar shingles on the top part of the house. A lot of people don't even stop and think about that. They just sort of have it in their minds it's all brick, but it really isn't. The top part is of wood and cedar shingles. And the shingles were stained to match the brick. And we moved into it in 1950. And this was the same year that our baby boy was born. So that was always, it's a very year that we would always remember, because these two things happened. So I never forget either one of them that way. That I might say for Vic, he put in the concrete on this back porch that you come up to when you first come in the back of the house. Here are our 3 children. George is growing up a bit here. He went to what we called the Bear School. It was over in Illinois, and he was gone like maybe 4 or 5 weeks, and that's the first we'd been apart. Anyway, he was gone, and I was very lonely without him. Of course, I had all my children, and my mother, bless her heart, she was always there for me, and she came and stayed with me during the time he was gone. So that made the time not seem so long. But I remember when he came home, we were certainly happy to see one another. Here's Vic. It shows him with his bear sign. So he put this bear alignment equipment in the front of his garage. And at one time, Vic had a roadway made from this is where the garage is over in here, and he had this roadway dug out and made to go up to the old highway, so that there was a road between the old highway and the new highway. But we just had so many people running up and down through there, and it became more dangerous. You really thought it was a dangerous thing having it there, and it made it so, it was no longer private. So we just let it grow back up. Then there's a picture of Mary Ellen standing and ringing the front doorbell, and she was selling Girl Scout cookies. Then we had men come in who put down the concrete. I have some nice pictures of Vicki in this book now. And here I am cleaning the picture window. I wore high-heeled shoes all the time. I still wore those high-heeled shoes around my house and did my housework. And here is a picture of my amaryllis, which had come to my mother from her mother, and which she gave to me. And that amaryllis, the original bulbs that we keep planting and replanting, We'd have to be getting close to 200 years old, and that's no joke. Vic's putting up the antenna for our new television set. Television was just new at that time. Then at the back of the house, we had another two men who came from one of the glass companies, and they put glass windows in the back porch, and then you could have screens in the windows in the summer, and then put the glass into the windows in the wintertime. Then by the time that winter came, here we were in our nice warm house, and we really appreciated it because the house where we had lived before hadn't had a furnace or anything, and I was always sort of cold. This is the school bus bringing our children home from school. It was very good for us here because the bus picked our children up right in front of their door. Then here I am at the mailbox. That was a very nice thing because mail's always very important to me. And the happy thing was that we got mail service. And they put the mail right in the box right on my front porch. And prior to that, we had to go all the way to Saliville to get our mail. And I was forever after Vic to go down to the Saliville to get the mail. Before we were ever married, I said, you know, what I want to have is a house with a willow tree. So Vic had that in his mind. He thought, well, you know, I got to get her a house with a willow tree. Well, he planted a willow tree, and I loved that tree. It was right out in my backyard. But then in 1968, we had a tornado. But what seemed the worst to me, it completely uprooted my willow tree. And so that was the last of the willow tree, and that was very sad. And I sort of, you know, thought I would like to have another one, but Vic said, well, they're really kind of dangerous to have so near the house. And the way the backyard is now, it looks so barren because when we were in Florida, I think it's a year ago this fall, we came back home and found that our great big maple tree had blown over, and it looked as though it had been hit by lightning. Now it's just a barren space, and everyone, you know, remarks about how bare the yard looks, and it just sort of deprived us of our privacy. So we're going to try to grow some more trees. Oh, those are my little girls. On the left must be Becky and Mary Ellen. So those pictures up there are taken of them. I think they were about 2.5 years old, or something like that. And the dress is the same dress. The dress belonged to Vicki, and my brother had given it to her. So when I saved the dress then, and when Mary Ellen got to be the same age that Vicki was, I took her picture to the photographer and had her in the same dress and had it made so that they faced one another. those are my sisters, Lenore and Louise. Louise is standing, and Lenore is seated. And this was at the time, I think, of their high school graduation. So it's a really old picture. Lenore would have been 18 years older than Lorena and I. And then Louise would have been 16 years older. So they were at almost that age when, at those pictures when we were born, and they got two little twin sisters. And they were just almost like second mothers to us. Our oldest sister Lily, why she was 20 years old and was teaching her first school when we were born. Well, they're pictures of George. He didn't want me to put his pictures all up on the wall. And so I put them away. And when he got married and left home, I get the pictures out and put them in his room. But he didn't object. George actually, doesn't think of that furniture as his own room, because for the most part when he was home, it wasn't his own room. I had that furniture that was the furniture we had when we first got married. And both of my girls were born in that bed. And the picture of the ocean is a picture that's above the bed. And I got it one time up in Maine when we were on a vacation trip, and I just thought it was so pretty. And there's an old oil lamp, which came from my mother's. The other two pictures that are over by the closet were painted by Alice, my niece. So as far as I continued to play, and then I had a baby who was Vicki, who was Ann's mother. And so when she became, about 5 or 6 years old, well, I decided, well, why can't I teach her to play the piano? So I started giving her piano lessons, and she learned to play. Well, then her cousin Susan, who was just about her age, wanted to play the piano. So I started teaching her. Then Susan had a friend named Patty May. She wanted to learn to play the piano. So I guess you might say she was my first professional debut at teaching someone outside of my family. So then it just grew and grew and grew, and I just kept teaching piano. I'll tell you a little story about Derek. He always such a charming little thing and could come up with some answer to anything that he did. He had a reason for it. So his mother one time, she had said to him that something to the effect that you would have memories. You would have memories of your grandmother's house because of this sliding door cabinet, that it would be something that would live in your memory. And when he came here, he just loved to get into that cabinet. And he would just get in there and he would get out everything. By the time he was ready to go home, all the back entry and part of the kitchen was filled with stuff out of the sliding door cabinet. And his mother and dad said he could not go home leaving that stuff for grandmother to have to pick up. So as a rule, they ended up helping him, but he would go ahead and try to pick it up then. And so one time he was in there, and where the shelves come, he would use the shelf to climb on. So he gets up in the sliding door cabinet, he climbs up, and he just starts throwing things everywhere, And his mother says, "Derek, what are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm building memories."